Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OSCA Live, proudly brought to you by the Old Scots Collegians Association. My name's Scott Montgomery, OSCA's Executive Director, and it's terrific to have your company tonight. And it's terrific as well to have my good friend, Luke Darcy, with me. Good evening, Luke, and how's things?
Scotty, thanks for having me. Great to catch up with you, and looking forward to chatting tonight. Really appreciate it.
Terrific. No, well, thanks for coming on board. Now, Luke, when you research Luke Darcy, there's plenty of material to work on. And I've narrowed it down to four points. Your Scotch connection, your football interests, obviously, when you're playing days, your media as it currently stands today, and something that's we're both passionate about is health and wellness. So they're the type of topics we're going to talk about tonight. So Luke, you've got, let's start with your family connection. And I'll start with your kids first. You've got 4. And you've got 3 boys here at the school in year 11, 7 and grade 4, I think it is, something like that. But anyway, I know Sam is now taller than you in year 11, so watch out. So you're obviously very proud of those kids and what they're up to. And how important is it for you as a dad watching them grow up, and how important is that the sport play a role in their in their well-being, and how important it is for them?
Yeah, look, I suppose I probably think of it maybe slightly different, Scotty, is that you just hope, as every kid's got passion for something, and I know that's something that I hear Scotch talk about a lot and celebrate a lot. What's your passion? I think I've heard Tom Batty, the principal, talk a lot about. We want to find that passion in kids and celebrate it. And I suppose a fair bit of my passion was the sporting world, and lucky enough to have that as my job for the first part of my life. And I probably, sometimes your kids go off into different directions, and they have got a whole range of passions, but the 4 of them, my daughter's 15, she's in year 9 at St Catherine's as well. They're all really passionate about sport, passionate about exercise. And it's probably, in this time where we've been locked down at home, it's probably been something that's been pretty helpful for them, and their well-being is, they're pretty self-started and love getting out and training and exercising, which has been good.
That is good. Now, your Scotch connection, and I didn't know this, I don't know that you even know this, that you have an amazing Scotch connection with the school. And we have Paul Monsieur, our Scotch College archivist. When he registered for this on the weekend, he rang me and he said, did you know that Luke Darcy has a really strong connection with the school? And I said, no, I didn't, Paul. And so he showed me this family tree that was off the tree, and I shared it with you. And just a couple of stats here is that you have an amazing 61 Scotch connections with the school. And it's all from your wife's side, I believe, including an Olympic medalist in your wife's side of the family. And I suspect that the kids get a lot of their energy and drive and talent from the mum's side.
I think almost all of it, Scotty, comes from the mum side, and I won't be taking credit for any of it, but I was loosely aware. So my wife was Rebecca Shaw, her maiden name, and her dad, David Shaw, played for Essendon, won a couple of premierships, David, and was president of Essendon. And I know that one of his sort of anomalies was that he was always destined to come to Scotch College. And as you said, I got the 61 connections you sent through. So the Shaw family were very, very much, it was just a given. They were all from Ballarat, and they all came to Scotch College. And I haven't had the chance to ring David, who's healthy and well, and understand exactly what happened and why he ended up going to Melbourne Uni. I think he stayed at Ballarat College, I think, and didn't come down to Scotch. I'm not exactly sure why that was the case, but he was very excited when he found out the 3 boys were down and had a place at Scotch. He was pretty excited about it.
Fantastic. And I love the family tree connection. So you probably answered this a little bit, but someone was curious as to know why you chose Scotch for your boys.
Yeah, look, I mean, you sort of feel a bit like the ultimate outsider, Scotty, growing up in Adelaide, and you had no bias really at all. We lived, close by, and I think it was my wife who was really driving that conversation. And you don't tend to argue, Scotty.
Many do. Look,
you tend
don't get into trouble.
If you're smart, you tend to listen a lot and say yes. So look, I must admit, I didn't really have, and I think the guys are really, really lucky anywhere in this sort of bubble we're in, if you get an education like Scotch, and I'm sure the other schools, likewise provide an amazing education. So maybe it was a bit of luck, but they've had a fantastic experience. They've met great people. The teachers have been extraordinary. They've built great relationships with the teachers, and to me, that's what it's about. People like you who are so passionate about education, who changed these young people's lives, and our three boys have been really lucky.
No, that's terrific. One of the questions I had from our participants was, in your view, what is it about Scotch College that you think is most valuable to your kids?
I think it probably comes back. I mean, clearly you walk in the grounds and, first time you do it, it takes your breath away. It's a bit like the Botanic Gardens. And that is something that's, I think an incredible privilege for them all to do. But I always think it comes down to the people. The buildings can be beautiful, but you always focus on the people. And I've been, just really not surprised, but just enjoyed the quality of people, the people who care about education, who want to make an impact on your kids. And obviously, I grew up in South Australia. I went to a school called Rostrevor College over there. Had a great network of friends in a similar sort of vein, but I've just seen how connected Scotch people are, how much they love their school, how proud they are of it, how proud they are of the people that are there. And so it's been a really nice part of my life to be caught up in it.
Terrific. Now let's move on to football, and you've actually mentioned that you grew up in Adelaide, and that's where you've come from. And someone was asking, and I was curious as to where you did play your junior football.
Yeah, I ended up playing for a club called South Adelaide. So my dad was Melbourne born. My mum was Melbourne born. He played for the Bulldogs, but went over at the end of his career, middle and end of his career, and to captain coach South Adelaide. So I was father-son to South Adelaide in South Australia. So it was the other side of town. So I was a bit of an outsider going down south, as it was from where I went to school, and then was drafted father-son to the Bulldogs. In those days, you could basically put a father-son on your list without having to get a draft selection. So it might have helped my chances in the early days. But I was very much had a strong connection to Melbourne through my dad's history, and was pretty happy to find my way over here to Melbourne.
Yeah. So that leads us to your AFL journey, which was an amazing career that you had, Luke, and you must be very proud of it. But just a couple of stats here before we have a chat about it was that you came to the Western Bulldogs, which was known as Footscray, back in 1994. You went on to play up until about 14 years until 2007. And across the journey, you managed to amass 226 games and a total of 183 goals. Now, I did a bit of Google does an amazing thing when you can drill into stats. So would you be surprised that you had just over 2,000 kicks in your career?
Yeah, no, I've never heard that before.
So just over 2,000. That's actual kicks in games. And then 1,200 hand passes. So that's not a bad ratio. And I wish the ratio was a bit like that today rather than more kicks than hand passes. So I just thought I'd throw that in. So your debut year was an interesting one as well, Luke. 1994 for one game.
Yeah.
And remember your stats that day?
Yeah, I get reminded about this. The joy of working on radio is that people have got access to stats. And did I get 2 handballs or not?
It was a total of 2 hand passes.
Yeah,
that's it. So 1990, I was wondering, did you get dropped after that performance?
I did. I absolutely did. I came in and I played. Chris Grant was my teammate, who was a superstar player, and he got knocked out by who turned out to be a great friend of mine, the late great Danny Frawley, and he was a pretty intimidating defender, Danny Frawley. And I came out onto the ground and I stood at centre forward, and he said, "See your mate out there? He's just gone off concussed." He said, "You're next up," and so it might have led me to sort of try to run around and stay away from Spud as much as I could. So I didn't touch the ball much. We won the game. I got dropped.
I was wondering about that.
It took me a while to find my feet, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it didn't take long for you to establish yourself as a key player. But just before, you hit your straps a little bit, there was a movie made in 1996, so it would have been your 3rd year in, and that's when you started to get some regular games. I did a bit of a quick preview on that. I'm going to actually watch it in time. The Year of the Doggy, it sounds fascinating. But there was a really interesting character around that time called Danny Southern. And And for those who remember Danny Southern, he had this mullet that kind of looks like what the boys are wearing now, I think. And I'm like, wow, it's gone full circuit. So Danny, he sounded like a bit of a character. What was he like to play with?
He was brilliant, Scotty, and we became great friends and still are to this day. I literally landed at the airport from Adelaide. He landed from Perth, and we got taken from the airport to the club on our first day together. And he was just an extraordinary character. He was sort of wise and different beyond his years. He, at 15 was the best player in Australia and was going to go to the West Coast Eagles. And he hurt his knee really badly, and the West Coast didn't select him. So he arrived with a fairly big chip on his shoulder about the West Coast Eagles, Danny. I was arriving going, I hope I get to play a game and I can stay in Melbourne. I was maybe a bit less ambitious than him, but it was remarkable. He would go away every year, go around and travel around remote, tribes around Africa and go and catch up with the last pygmy tribe. And he had this incredible thirst to try and travel and better himself. And he was remarkable. His knee let him down in the end, but his first year he was almost an All-Australian. And we sort of discovered Melbourne a bit together. We hung out a lot, and he was such a different, came from a very different world to me, Sutho, but he's a great person. He ended up living in Egypt for a long period of time, and he's back in Perth now, having married a beautiful Egyptian lady, and they got a couple of kids, so he's going really well.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's a good story. He could be one for OSCA Live on the track.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting to interview. So in 2002, you became All-Australian, which is an amazing feat. And I was just wondering if you could just share how that year was and why it was so special, and some of the players and some of the stars that you played with in that team. 2002, I think it was.
Yeah, look, my memory's not great, Scotty, to be honest with you, for detail on a lot of stuff. It sort of blends into one. But yeah, I think probably, I was fairly underdeveloped, fairly immature 18-year-old who arrived, might have been 17, just turned 18. And so I really just wasn't prepared for AFL football looking back. And it took me a while to find my feet. And once I did, lucky enough to play in some really great teams. We, got very close a few times to grand finals and were top of the ladder around that era. So I just had great influences. Scotty Wine was amazing to me. He was the reigning Brownlow medalist at the time, the day that I arrived. And I just competed with him at training and learned a lot from him. And look, the great part for me is just these amazing friendships that you form that are lifelong friendships from such, from Danny Southern from Perth, who was crazy and had tattoos and had a snake in his house, to the whole range of, Scotty Wine who's gone on and had an incredible life after football, incredible success, to Tony Liberatore, the angriest person I've ever met in my life, who was 4'3" and competed like you'd never seen before, to Leon Cameron, who's my great. You could go through, Scott. I could talk to you for an hour and a half about the friendships that have been formed out of that. So you feel pretty lucky.
I'm sure. Yeah, there's some terrific bonds that you've created there. So you were captain from 2005 and 2006 of the Doggies, but that wasn't a great period for you. You, if you would like to share with the injuries that you curtailed during those times.
Yeah, look, Rodney Eake became the coach, who's now involved at Scotch Footy, which is a great, and spending a bit of time with my son Sam. So I've enjoyed seeing the cycle of life continue. And he made me captain in that year in 2005, and was probably playing as well as I'd ever played in my career. And round 7 down at Geelong, I tore my ACL playing full forward on Matthew Scarlett. And then spent 12 months out, got really fit and strong and felt really good. In our last practice game before the Christmas break, we played another practice game, and I felt fantastic. But the same motion happened again. I tore my ACL again. And so I missed 2 full years, probably right at the time where I felt like I was, in the best shape I'd been in. So I was lucky enough to come back and play a full 12 months in 2007, but really hampered, really couldn't jump or twist and turn. So probably fast-tracked the next part of my life, having 2 years out right at the very end.
Because I did notice that you played 20-odd games in your final year, and then you retired. So your knees must have been shot in terms of your speed and agility and bits and pieces. And I was curious to know, if you'd had those injuries today, would science have helped you to play a bit longer, or would your rehabilitation have been any different?
Oh, absolutely, Scott. I look at it now and just think, really, I just didn't have a great grasp on what was required. I think to repair. You never know whether a freak accident would have got you, but I think I would have done things completely differently now, knowing what you know in terms of how to rehab and how to do it differently. But yeah, as I said, I did get out the field and play all those games in that last year. But I think when you knew what it was like to move the way you wanted to, it was a pretty easy decision to move on to the next part of your life.
Cool. No, it was an amazing career, which leads us into the next phase of your life. And I'd like to talk about your radio stint at the moment. And you're terrific on radio, and I listen when I can. And so you're on Triple M's The Hot Breakfast with our, well, I wouldn't say friend Eddie McGuire because he's a Melbourne Grammar parent. Yeah. But he's done a lot of terrific things, Ed. He's got his critics out there, but I really like what he's doing with his involvement with footy and the community and bits and pieces. So what's he like to work with, Eddie McGuire? Getting up at what hours you get up to just to start the breakfast?
The alarm goes at 4:30, and this is the 11th year we've done the show, and look, I had the pleasure of meeting Eddie many years ago when the footy show first started. Footy show started in 1994, and as you would remember, it was so big. We used to find out whether we were in the team announced on the footy show. That you'd sit down on Thursday night, and that would be you're in or you're out, depending on whether Eddie announced it. So I was a pretty regular guest on that show over the journey, and we sort of had a long relationship. It's a pretty small community, the AFL community. So yeah, look, it's been a lot of fun to be able to have an opportunity to do a show that covers a lot of Melbourne on a daily basis. Has been I always saw myself playing, really wanting to call football. My dad commentated sport in South Australia, cricket and footy, and I used to sit in the back of the commentary box. And when I was playing, it used to drive me mad. I used to commentate myself playing as I was going to a marking contest, which was slightly annoying, Scotty. And occasionally a teammate or an opponent would go, "Mate, what are you doing?" Yeah, here's Darcy. He comes to centre forward. He's going to take a great mark. My opponent would be going, "Mate, what are you talking about, mate? Can you turn that off?" So it was that part of it was in me. Doing breakfast radio, I probably hadn't thought of, but it's been a good job.
Yeah, it has. I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but you had a terrific interview with Dan Andrews last week, and it certainly hit the press. And it was fascinating to listen to, particularly in the world that we're living in now. And one of our registered participants tonight actually said, and I'll quote, a great recent radio interview, Luke. Thank you. And that was a couple of comments that came through. And I think that resonated with the public in regards to the conversations that you did have with Dan and the times that we had. And I was just curious, I don't think we have to go into detail with that, but I would encourage everyone to have a listen to that in your conversations, about 7 minutes. You can get it on Google. But so what was your take from that interview that you had with him? And what did you take away? And if you probably had a chance to reflect on that.
Yeah, I certainly had some time to reflect, Scotty. Probably didn't, know the sort of breadth that would go and how many people would react in that way. And I'm not, this privileged position when you do a show like that to have all sorts of leaders come through our studio. Every Prime Minister in the last 11 years, many, many times, leaders of all sorts of industry, from all walks of life. And Dan Andrews has been one of the most consistent. I think he would have been in our studio. I would have been there I would estimate somewhere between 20 and 30 times. And, I've always had a really enjoyable time interviewing him. He's smart, he's intelligent, he's well thought out. I just, feel when you have a platform at this time, it's an extraordinary time to live in Victoria, that, if you do and you've got some strong thoughts, even if you are, coming from whatever background you have, to not ask, hopefully well thought out, respectful questions that I wasn't trying to inject myself into this conversation by any stretch, Scotty. I was trying to ask questions I felt maybe hadn't been asked in a way before around, is there an alternative? Can we get our kids back to school? Can we potentially live with this virus and maybe find a way to pivot to a strategy that allows us to do that quickly? So I certainly wasn't, pretending that I had an expertise in this, but more just asking questions. And look, I found Dan, he's respectful, and I don't think he would have had a problem with it as well. I think maybe just for whatever reason, questions that hadn't been asked before. So I had an interesting week. I had lots of emails coming in. I'm getting lots of feedback. It wasn't a political commentary. It was more just probably the way my mind always works, Scotty, which is ask questions and hopefully get some answers.
No, I think you did it really well, and I think he answered them pretty well too. So it was, and I encourage everyone to have a listen. So, and I encourage you to keep up those questions when you get the opportunity, Luke. I think it's really refreshing, and we need guys like you to ask the questions that we can't. So
and hopefully we do that, Scotty, with our kids as well. You know, like we sit around the dinner table. That's been one of the beauties of this time, if you can find a positive in it, is the debate we've had, because we've had so many dinners together. And, you know, for me, you want your kids to challenge us as parents. You want them to challenge you guys as teachers. You want them to ask inquisitive questions around, particularly at a time where, no community's been through what Melbourne's going through in the world for this extended period of time. So you'd hope people are inquiring about, as we go, it's just the best pathway forward. So I hope that opens some conversations.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. Your family business has a long connection within the hospitality industry and running some pubs and bits and pieces like that. So are you still involved in that? And I was more curious around the impact that this pandemic is having on hospitality, which must be massive.
Yeah, look, I've been fortunate enough, and probably while I was working in media, to have a range of other different interests. And we grew up in the hospitality industry as kids. We used to live upstairs in the old-fashioned pub. So our bedrooms were the old hotel rooms in South Australia. And all of us, I've got an older brother, an older sister and a younger sister. I think all of us at some stage thought we will never, ever, ever get into the hospitality industry. We saw how hard my mum and dad worked in it. But I think it's somewhere, it was deep in our blood, and it was my older brother and I probably rebooted the family business here in Melbourne, and have, for 15 or 20 years now, been actively involved in the sector. And it's a challenge. It's never been in the hardest shape, but I think Melbourne's so identified by its restaurant and its cafe and bar industry that it's really suffering. To have this extended amount of time closed without a clear pathway is a challenge, but it's a really resilient group of people, creative group of people. Most of them are small family businesses. Most of them are owned by, and like any, like the Scotch community or the AFL community, that group of people are really supportive, and it's brought out the best in people too. When people are under challenge, you just see people reach out, try and help each other, try and find a way through, no matter how hard it is. And I'm really optimistic and glass half full, that we can find solutions to save as many of those businesses as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's hope so. I wanted to move on to a topic that's it's a passion of mine. It's becoming more of a passion with each day that passes with me. If I find myself doing the walks and thinking about mental health and wellness, particularly for our year 12s and the younger generation, and the experiences that we've had as, I'm 50 odd now, so, and how we can impart that on to the younger ones. And I'm still learning and you're still learning, and it's a bit of a passion of yours as well. So your passion for health and wellness, and you're now part of the Channel 7 program for House of Wellness as a program. I'd be interested to hear about that. And also you've dabbled in a business over in Bali, specifically around wellness as well. So why don't you take us to Bali and take us away from Victoria for a second.
Yeah, I'd like to be there.
Dream by the pool and a bit of yoga or something. So.
Yeah, look, I had the incredible fortune. I look back, my second year at the Bulldogs, so as an 18 or 19-year-old, our president at the time, David Smorgan, paid for a meditation teacher to come to the club, and he insisted that he had a certain amount of hours with the team. You can imagine that was pretty out there for the western suburbs of Melbourne in 1996 or 1997. And Doug Hawkins and some of my older teammates, it was probably a bridge too far for them to maybe take on something like meditation. I was open-minded, and a handful of us younger guys learned, and it just became part of my life schedule. I didn't overthink it. It was like doing a weight session or going into the pool to recover. So all throughout my career, I just started this practice, 20 minutes twice a day meditating. But as soon as I finished in 2007, I stopped doing it, like I stopped doing a lot of other footy things. And it was my wife, Beck, who about a year later said, geez, you've turned into a nightmare, How hard at work are you? And as I said, you get a bit of feedback, Scotty, on the
Take it on.
Front. And she was like, yelling at the kids, and and I just put it down to me transitioning out of footy. She said, you used to do this really consistent practice twice a day. And then I really understood that wasn't just helping me in footy, that was helping me in so many other areas of my life. And so I've been, since then, I was passionate about it when I was playing, but I didn't quite get into I'm really passionate about daily routine. I'm not sure if you got me now, just talking about daily routines and the benefit of that in your life. And so that led into us opening a health retreat in Bali 10 years ago, which has been a great passion and been fantastic for our family and fantastic for lots of other people. So, it is a real passion.
Yeah. And tell me about how you got involved with Channel 7 and the House of Wellness. That's going well.
Yeah, well, I think, probably when I first started on radio on Triple M in Melbourne, they said, what are you into? And I mentioned meditation, and they said, whatever you do, don't mention that on air. No one will listen ever again. And now it's, we have this conversation when it comes up, and, truck drivers that are driving to work talk openly about wanting to improve their mental health. And I think sometimes it hasn't been something that males in particular have been great at, talking about owning up to wanting to improve something, in their health and their well-being and their mental health space. So it was just a natural progression. The show came to me and said, we hear you talk a lot about wellness and well-being. Are you interested in it? And look, I love the idea of telling stories that can, preventatively improve our health, not waiting until you get to the point where it's got out of hand and you really are in trouble. If you do something daily and you look after yourself, hopefully daily, I think that's such a passionate space for me is you put these credits in the bank, help you to live a happier life. People equate exercise all the time and understand if you want to get fitter, you probably do need to do some form of exercise, but people don't really equate doing something daily that helps their mental health. And I think there's a huge gap. We're getting better at it. Schools are getting better at it. I see it at Scotch all the time. Lots of conversations now around mindfulness, around meditation, around Hugh Van Geilenberg's work with the Resilience Project. Scotch are putting Hugh's an absolute ripper. I talk to him regularly about this space. So I think schools are really getting there, and I hope they will, because more than anything, you want your kids to leave resilient and with a strong understanding of how to be mentally happy.
That word resilient, I'll come back to in a sec. So there was a question from the audience, was the role of optimism in mental health and wellness. So there's a lot of pessimists out there, and the importance of being optimistic and happy and getting some active things in your life.
I love that. I love that thought, and I couldn't subscribe to it anymore. I think everyone's got enormous challenge, but you always gravitate. I certainly do, to those that you feel that sense of positivity, that sense of hey, you know what, we're in an extraordinary time at the moment, but there is those little green shoots of optimism that you can focus on, and we've been lucky enough, as you said, to scale back your life, to have these great family dinners, to be around your kids more often. If you flip it and try and look for where the positivity is, I think it's always a healthier space to start. You have got some control over that, no matter how tough they are.
Terrific. I've started doing a lot more walks since the pandemic. I used to be a runner, but now I find myself walking. But I found myself listening to a few podcasts, and I was wondering if you'd gravitated to any series that you'd like to share. I've certainly gravitated to a podcast called The Imperfects, which is an interesting one. But anyway, I was interested to see if you were listening to anything at the moment.
Yeah, I think The Imperfects might be Hugh Van Geilenberg's podcast, but I love the space. I think it's fantastic. I often listen to a lot of TED Talks. In fact, I was listening yesterday to Sir Ken Robinson's famous TED Talk, which is the most listened to ever TED Talk in history, who was one of the great educators. I'm not sure if you've heard it, Scotty, but he talks about creativity and how schools need to really focus on creativity as much as we do literacy. He passed away in the last 6 months, unfortunately, Sir Ken Robinson, but that space now is fantastic. You can find and learn so much when you're out there going for a walk, and that's one I'd encourage. If you haven't heard it goes for 19 minutes. It's the most listened to podcast ever. It's an education-based podcast. I think a lot of the parents out there would be pretty fascinated by it.
Terrific. Thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard of that one, but we'll have a listen. Just getting to wrapping a few things up here, but someone was interested to know whether you have had a thought of going into politics.
No, not in any shape or form.
Moving on.
Yeah, particularly after last week.
Oh,
No, I don't think that's my skill set.
no, I'm glad to hear that. Just two final questions for me. So someone was asking best life advice.
I probably touched on it earlier, Scotty, and to me, it's establishing a daily routine that serves you well, and that you and there's such a range of things you can do. I think, probably, as I said, lucky enough to have found something that just keeps me pretty steady. I think it helps me to be a better dad, helps me to be a better partner, and I'm pretty fastidious in it. I always think if you start your day with a couple of things that make you feel better and you can exercise and eat well, I think it's a pretty good place to start.
No, that's very good advice. And just to finally, I've got a daughter in year 12, and I know the year 12s are doing it tough this year. Your Sam's lucky to have avoided it. Well, let's hope he avoids it as a year 11 boy going into year 12. So if you could just, if I was to slice this down for something for them, a little message for our year 12 boys and girls that are listening tonight.
Yeah, firstly, Scott, I've felt for that year level and that age group more than anyone in the community. I think it's been as hard on them as any group. It's such a unique year, and I'm obviously we're hopeful next year it returns as close to normal as possible. So I just think, firstly, you guys have been incredible that year level. The year 12s that I've bumped into and had conversation with, I've been just unbelievably inspired by how resilient they are, how well they've pivoted. I haven't heard complaints or poor me out of that group. They've all just, yep, okay, this is what we need to do, and they've had great perspective. So I think the thing I would say is that this is going to end. You've missed out on some things, but I go back to the previous question about optimism. What's coming up? What have you learned from this time? How have you learned to connect with your friends in a different way? What's coming up that you can look forward to? And there's so many things to look forward to when we get back out and can travel. And that group deserve every bit of support we can get. You've been remarkable. I hope you get to get away together and spend some time together. And for all those guys that have been through, I think the year 12, I've still my closest friends in life came through school with me. You form these friendships that will stay with you for life. And the passage of time, we'll look back and go, I remember 2020. You know what? We got through it. It was challenging, but we found a way. And I'm incredibly respectful of how resilient that group of people have been.
Oh, well, thanks, Luke, and thanks for sharing that message for them. I'll be sure to share it with them. So, Luke, thanks again for saying yes when I reached out to you. Come on board and join me in this lovely chat. So it's been terrific to have a chat tonight. And so thanks again on behalf of the school community and what you do within the community with your family, and you're involved, and you're just a passionate and terrific guy. So thanks very much for joining us. So
yeah, thanks. Can I just say thanks to all the teachers at Scotch too. It's been a really tough year for you guys, and we've seen firsthand the work that you guys do. It's incredible, and I know that through these challenges our guys have benefited. I think we probably understand and respect the work you guys do even more. So thanks to the Scotch teachers in particular, they've been amazing. Thanks, sir.
Well said, Luke, and I concur with those thoughts. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for joining us on OSCA Live. It's been a privilege to bring Luke to you, and I hope you got something out of it. So keep active out there, keep well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.